Slobodan Milošević. Slobodan Milošević was the president of Yugoslavia during one of the bloodiest conflicts in Europe after World War II. He was accused of ordering war crimes and genocide during the Balkan Wars in the 1990s, where hundreds of thousands of people died or were displaced. After losing power, Milošević was put on trial by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, in The Hague. During the trial, Milošević refused to accept the charges and often acted aggressively, demanding fairness and justice. He spent months alone in a small prison cell, under intense stress. Reports from court officials and guards say that Milošević screamed in frustration and pain, unable to handle the pressure of the trial and his failing health. In March 2006, Milošević was found dead in his cell. The official cause was a heart attack, but many believe the stress and his harsh conditions played a large role. His final attempts to defend himself, to explain his side of the story, went unheard by most of the world. The screams of a man facing the end of his power and freedom became a bitter symbol of how justice and truth can be lost in the chaos of war and politics. The trial transcripts and ICTY reports provide detailed records of Milošević's behavior and the events leading up to his death. They show a man desperate to be heard, but ultimately silenced by his past and the weight of history. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with an iron fist for more than 2 decades. His government was known for violence, oppression, and wars that caused suffering across the region. After the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, Saddam was captured and put on trial for crimes against humanity, including the killing of thousands of his own people. During the trial, Saddam remained defiant, refusing to admit guilt. However, when the court sentenced him to death, his final moments became a dramatic end to his brutal rule. On December 30th, 2006, as he was executed by hanging, recordings and eyewitness reports reveal that Saddam screamed and shouted, pleading for mercy. These screams were quickly cut short as the noose tightened around his neck. The world watched as a violent chapter in history closed. Despite his pleas, Saddam's screams were drowned out by the weight of justice and global politics. His death marked not only the end of a dictator, but also a complex moment where revenge, justice, and power intersected. The recordings of the execution and testimonies from those present give a clear account of Saddam's last moments. They show a man losing control, struggling to survive as his time ran out, but ultimately silenced by the final act of judgment. Nicolae Ceaușescu. Nicolae Ceaușescu was Romania's communist leader for more than 2 decades. His rule was marked by strict control, economic hardship, and widespread fear. By 1989, people were tired of his oppressive regime, and protests started to spread across the country. The situation quickly escalated into a full-scale revolution. During the final days of his rule, Ceaușescu tried to hold on to power by shouting orders and making desperate attempts to control the crowd. But the people had had enough. The protests turned violent, and the army eventually sided with the revolutionaries. Despite his screams and commands, no one listened or obeyed him anymore. Ceaușescu and his wife were captured, put on a quick trial, and sentenced to death. On December 25, 1989, they were executed by firing squad. Archive footage and eyewitness reports show Ceaușescu's last moments filled with anger, fear, and screams. But these cries were ignored amid the chaos of the revolution. His violent fall marked the end of Romania's communist era, showing how quickly power can disappear when people rise up. The screams of a desperate leader were lost in the noise of a country breaking free from oppression. Carlos Menem. Carlos Menem was the president of Argentina throughout most of the 1990s. His time in office started with promises of reform and economic growth, but the country soon faced a deep and painful crisis. Argentina's economy collapsed due to massive debt, rising unemployment, and severe inflation. During this period, the people of Argentina protested loudly, screaming in frustration over lost jobs, poverty, and broken promises. These protests grew bigger and more intense as the government struggled to manage the crisis. Despite the clear signs of social and political unrest, many international institutions and foreign creditors ignored the warning signs for years. They continued to support policies that favored debt repayment over the well-being of ordinary Argentinians. Menem's presidency ended with the country still in turmoil. His cries for help and reform, drowned out by global economic interests, focused more on money than on the people suffering at home. The silent screams of millions went unheard on the international stage, highlighting how political and social struggles can be overshadowed by larger financial powers. This period in Argentina's history shows how economic crises can create deep social pain, and how sometimes the voices of a nation in distress are ignored by those with the power to help. Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il rose to power in North Korea during the 1990s, taking control after the death of his father, Kim Il-sung. His rule was marked by extreme cruelty and strict control over the population. During the mid-1990s, North Korea faced one of the worst famines in modern history, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people. Despite the scale of suffering, the voices and cries of the starving population inside North Korea went largely unheard outside the country. The government tightly controlled information, preventing news of the famine and the harsh living conditions from spreading. Meanwhile, the regime continued its harsh policies, prioritizing military power and political control over the welfare of its people. International organizations like the United Nations tried to provide aid and report on the crisis, but access was limited, and the regime resisted outside help. Defectors who managed to escape told stories of extreme hunger, fear, and repression, revealing the silent terror experienced by millions. The screams of those suffering under Kim Jong-il's rule were muffled by the regime's secrecy and the world's limited knowledge, showing how a ruthless leader's cruelty can keep millions trapped in silence. Hafez al-Assad. Hafez al-Assad ruled Syria as president from 1971 until his death in 2000. His leadership was marked by strict control, political repression, and a firm grip on power. In the final days of his life, reports say that Hafez suffered intense pain and agony. His screams and struggles were kept secret, hidden inside the walls of the presidential palace, away from the public eye. At the time of his death, Syria was already tense and uncertain. The country faced internal unrest and external pressures. Hafez's passing created a fragile moment for Syria, as the nation awaited the transition of power to his son, Bashar al-Assad. His last painful moments became a silent warning of the difficult years that would follow, including violent conflict and ongoing instability. Hafez al-Assad's death marked the end of an era, but his final screams inside the palace walls symbolized the pain and turmoil that Syria was about to face under the new leadership. Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu Sese Seko ruled Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, for over 3 decades. His time in power was marked by corruption, oppression, and the enrichment of himself and his close circle, while much of the country suffered. By the 1990s, Mobutu's control weakened as rebel forces gained strength and international support for his opponents grew. In 1997, facing inevitable defeat, Mobutu fled into exile in Morocco. During his final years, he reportedly expressed deep regret and desperation. These screams, whether of frustration, fear, or loss, were never heard beyond the walls of his exile. The world moved on, and the empire he had built collapsed without his pleas reaching anyone willing to listen. Mobutu's final years symbolized the lonely silence of a once powerful ruler who was abandoned and forgotten. His cries went ignored as history closed the chapter on his long, controversial rule. Yeltsin's Russia. Boris Yeltsin led Russia during a time of great change and uncertainty in the 1990s. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia struggled with political chaos, economic collapse, and widespread corruption. Many citizens faced poverty, unemployment, and loss of trust in their government. Throughout Yeltsin's presidency, there were many protests and cries for reform from the Russian people. They demanded better living conditions, fair governance, and an end to the turmoil. However, these voices often went unheard or ignored by both the Kremlin and international powers. The government was too focused on maintaining control, while global leaders were preoccupied with their own interests. Yeltsin's Russia became a symbol of a superpower in decline. The silent screams of its people reflected the pain and confusion of a nation losing its place on the world stage. The collapse was not just political, but deeply personal for millions who felt abandoned by those in power.